Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville and the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, on Google Podcasts, on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you find your podcast. Today we'll be speaking to author Jody Smith about her wonderful kidlit, Princess Monroe. We are very excited to introduce you to Jody Smith and her book, Princess Monroe, but we're also super excited to let you know that the Reading with Your Kids podcast will be at the largest toy and game fair in North America. That's the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, coming on November 23rd and 24th, Navy Pier in Chicago. This is going to be an incredible time. We're giving folks a chance to find out what it's like to be part of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. And when you come to our booth and participate, you get entered to win our gigantic prize package. There are also going to be life-size toys and games that your kids can play with. There are going to be inventors they can meet. There are going to be authors they can meet. There's going to be totally interactive stage shows and so much more. You can save $3 per ticket by going to shytag.com. That's CHITAG.com, shytag.com. Use the promo code use the promo code RWYK. That's RWYK, the Reading with Your Kids initials. RWYK. Use that promo code and save $3 off each ticket, and there are no limits as to how many tickets you can buy. That's the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, November 23rd and 24th at Navy Pier in Chicago. Joining us on the line right now from Orono in the great state of Minnesota, she is the author of something that is called the Feminist Fairy Tale. Princess Monroe is the name of the book. Please welcome to the show, Jody Smith. Jody, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I am excited. I'm excited to have you on the show, and I'm excited to find out what in the world is a feminist fairy tale.
Well, I will define my feminist fairy tale as a fairy tale in which the princess saves herself.
Ah, perfect. Excellent. This is wonderful. As a dad of a very strong and independent young woman, I love that and can absolutely get behind that.
Yay! Yeah, then you know.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. I grew up, I'm almost 100, but even so, I grew up when supposedly men were men and women were supposed to stay at home, but, I was surrounded by strong, powerful, independent women all of my life.
Good for you. That's fantastic. It is fantastic. That's just, a lot of people were not, or
Yes.
have not been, I should say.
So tell us about the story we're going to experience when we read Princess Monroe in her Happily Ever After.
I will. Well, I'll give you a tiny bit of background, is that I had two of the same daughters, and when I quit my job and came here, I was watching them, and yes, they loved princesses, but they were also being ninjas and mathematicians and, all sorts of things. And so we would go to bed every night and read the book with the princess, and the stepmom was usually trying to poison her or they didn't have the best relationship. And then the prince would swoop in and kiss her and everything would be great. And so, I wanted to have a book that was about a princess chasing her curiosity. And eventually we'll find Prince Charming. He might come around again. But in this book, while her mom was trying to push her into marriage and tradition and all these things, Monroe was way too spunky and way too curious, and she had many other things that she wanted to do before she settled down.
Good for her. I love that. And it's interesting how the inspiration came about. My daughter was the same way. She enjoyed dancing, and she was an absolutely amazing dancer, but she also loved playing football. And, every night we were outside for about 3 or 4 years during middle school that we would be out throwing the football around every night.
I love that. A very similar story here. I don't want to spoil the ending, but let's just say I have quite the athlete as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. And I love the art. I'm on your website and the artwork of Princess Monroe. It actually reminds me a lot of my daughter. She's in a tutu and she's, hula hooping and she has basketball sneakers on.
Of course.
Yes.
Because, yes, every girl should. Everyone that wants to do the princess thing, but also play the sports and, get dirty and go on hikes and ride horses and all that, they gotta have proper shoes on. Mm-hmm. Those high heels won't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's the reaction been so far from folks who are experiencing Princess Monroe?
It's been absolutely spectacular. I think the timing was really good. I think everyone was having a similar issue that I was, reading these books every night. And these fairy tales are so great, like the old Disney fairy tales and I understand there's deeper meaning to them than what we read on the page. Mm-hmm. But when you're reading that to, a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, they may not. And so all they're seeing is the clothes and the fairy godmother and the coach and the dress and all these external things to make them happy. And so I just wanted a story where she figured it out on her own and figured out that it had nothing to do with anything outside of herself.
Yeah. Good for you. As you were talking about that and talking about the external things and I'm looking back and there were, the stories, the princesses, the dresses, the crowns, the tiaras, and all of that stuff. And my daughter was very beautiful, and everybody needed to tell us how beautiful she was. And, it's so pretty, and her hair is pretty, and there's a bow in her hair, and all that. And I remember one time when a waitress came over, and it seemed so silly. My daughter, I think, was like 2 years old, and we're sitting there, and the waitress came over and dropped the tray, and she goes, "Oh my goodness, your daughter's so precious and beautiful. She took my breath away." And my daughter and I kind of looked at each other, going, "She's angling for a really big tip here." But at that moment, I was just inspired to turn to my daughter and say, you were blessed. You are a very pretty girl, but remember, being beautiful on the inside is so much more important than being beautiful on the outside. And
I agree 100%. And there's more just than being beautiful, right?
Yes,
there's
absolutely.
so many other characteristics that we can start using to describe these little girls.
Yeah. I'm interested to see what your daughters think of Princess Monroe.
It's really funny because, I have 2 girls and each one of them is always trying to figure out who I wrote about because I only have one princess. But the reality is it's both of them, it was inspired by both of them. They are definitely my muses. And I would say, there's some of the mother-daughter relationship was inspired by the relationship I had with my own mother and the relationship I hope to have with my daughters. So, they think it's pretty fun. Obviously they think it's really cool when I go into school because as when you walk into an elementary school and you have a children's book in hand, you're pretty much, you're like the big woman on campus. They're like, who is this? Please read us a story. So now they're a little older, so they're not finding it they're both in middle school this year, so they're not finding it as entertaining. But
you're here again? Why?
Yeah. Mom, can you do this when I'm not in school? I'm like, well, that's not how it works.
Well, that's exciting. You were sharing with me before we started recording that you came to Minnesota from Southern California, and one of the neat things about the United States is that we do have this American culture, but we also have different cultures in every kind of part of the country. And Southern California is very different than Minnesota.
Yeah, it's a little different. It's the West Coast in general. I've lived in Arizona. I went to college in Arizona too, and it's It's very different. I will tell you, there are a lot of intangibles here that are not there that I love, and obviously those are the reasons I stay. But if the master of all things weather, like if I ever get to have dinner with that guy, I'm just going to be like, we have got to fix wintertime. This is silly. It's Arctic cold. It is so cold.
Yes, indeed. Do you think that coming from Southern California and being in that cold environment and, kind of different culture also inspired you to create Princess Monroe?
I do a little bit, being totally truthful. And not only do I live in the Midwest, I moved to this really small town, right? And so having lived in Los Angeles and Scottsdale, that are much bigger towns, I think I was surrounded by a lot more of these kind of independent, spunky, including myself. I worked full time until I moved here. And so, I think there wasn't as much representation out here. There was a lot of representation of the more traditional rules and not as much of the kind of independent, feisty princess I was looking for. And I went and looked and found a lot of other books that were written, from the perspective of a very feminist princess. The only difference was, there wasn't, my daughters also loved the princess. They loved the dress and the crowns and the shoes and the beauty of it, kind of all of that, all the refinement. They loved that. And in the books that I had found, it was like one of them, the princess takes off on a Harley. And in the other one, she's like wearing a paper bag by the end of the book. And I think they wanted both. They wanted both the princess story and, the fact that she could be independent and strong and all of those other things.
And I think that's really neat. And I think that's a real plus of your story. So I salute you and applaud you for making that choice. I'm curious. It's obvious to me, and it's probably obvious to folks listening, why you would want your young girls to read Princess Monroe and to kind of be inspired by her spunkiness and to understand that you can be a ballerina but also play football, probably not in the same season, but so you can be frilly and also strong and independent. What do you think is the value for a young boy to read Princess Monroe?
What is interesting, I had a very interesting conversation with a close girlfriend of mine, and she has a 4-year-old son. I think he's 4 now. And when she brought the book home, he was like, well, why do I want to read a princess book? Kind of a thing. And she said, well, why shouldn't you read a princess book? And we got into this very serious conversation about growing up. I'm born in the 70s. I didn't read a female protagonist in a book until Pippi Longstocking. I mean, I just don't even remember reading books that had main characters that were girls until much later. If at all. It was but I was reading about Peter Pan, and you were so into the story and the gender of the protagonist didn't matter. And the irony is, because my princess is an athlete and she takes on this kind of feminine, masculine, there's this really good balance of both. The book ended up becoming one of her son's favorite books.
Oh, wonderful.
So, yeah, I think it's just a difference. We just haven't done it. But, why haven't there been? I think it's very eye-opening, and it tends to make, having a girl character, just as normal as having a boy character, right? So it's kind of just throwing it in the mix. Are they going to want to read it every day? I don't know. Her son did. But it's nice to have a variety.
I agree, and I think it's we talk about the importance of diversity and exposing our kids to characters from different cultures and different parts of the world, and I think it's equally important to introduce our kids to characters who take on different roles and have different perspectives in life.
I agree. I think it's so important, especially if we're getting them at the ages, up until 8. They're so influential at that point, and you're setting the foundation for, the kind of person they are later. And if you think about, it's like a children's book seems it can appear to be to some people maybe not as significant, right, as like a novel, but you are developing, I mean, you are sitting there and having these conversations with these little brains that like don't know how to think yet. Like, is this okay? Can this person be like this? You know, my princess is also biracial, and I know there were a lot of conversations that went on around that. And I just think that age is so important to start having these conversations and have these kids just seeing this like beautiful rainbow of, like you said, you know, all different backgrounds, different personality types. Some kids aren't extroverted, you know, and want to be in front of the class all the time. I think it's great. There's books about super shy, introverted kids that like maybe like to do one task at a time. And then, you know, there's books about, I love all the books coming out now about, you know, they have every hobby you can think of or every activity you can think of at school. It's kind of like, this is the thing my kid likes, and not necessarily the big show or, you know, being the star athlete or being the class president. I know now I just am going on too long because obviously this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. So I can get down a rabbit hole pretty quick.
Well, I think it's important, and you touched on something. You started off by talking about, well, you know, we're reading these kids' books, and you know, maybe they're not as important as a novel. And I've kind of heard that before. In fact, I heard John Grisham talk. You know, he made a joke. I read 24 books. I read 24 books this weekend. Yeah, to my granddaughter. Who writes these kids' books? How can you do that? And kind of, you know, he's in front of a live audience. He's kind of making a joke about it. But I think when you think about it, I think that kids' books are much more important than most of the novels that are being written. You know, a lot of novels is just entertainment. I love John Grisham's book. That's why I was listening to him. But, you know, I don't remember a lot of the characters. I don't, you know, this is great eye candy, and it entertained me for, you know, the hours that I was reading it. But kids' books, and more importantly, the opportunity for conversations that kids' books create for families. I think that is building a foundation for kids that's going to last them a lifetime.
I completely agree. And in picture books specifically, you go into the whole like side of imagination, right? Mm-hmm. So as the older we get, we start to close down a little bit in these like wild, I mean, I remember reading Dr. Seuss. I was born in San Diego. And I lived on Dr. Seuss when I was younger. And I just remember, it was like, who wrote this book? Like, how can he just make up this animal and make up these words? And, you know, he completely invented like cadence and all the colors. Like, I remember the bright colors. And I think just the pure like opening of your brain and all of the things that they can take in. And these kids are taking it all in, even though it may seem like a page, right, that only has, let's say 20 words on it. They're taking in the whole thing at one time, and it's so fun to have the conversation after because you have no idea what piece they hung on to or like what few pieces, you know?
Yeah. And that's the thing that's so much fun, you know, those conversations. I remember having those conversations with my kids, and what did you see? What did you hear? And, you know, they would hear or see something completely different than I heard and saw. And that was one of the things that was really fun, was letting them share with me what they saw, what they heard, and me sharing with them. And, you know, it was kind of the start of their, you know, learning that people do see things from different perspectives, and we need to take that into account. And it's really valuable to value the fact that folks have these different perspectives.
I agree. One of my favorite stories from reading the book to kids, I was reading to this little girl, and at the end of the book, you know, let's just say everybody finds their inner voice. I'll say that. I'm like trying not to spoil the end. And this little girl, she was probably about 5, and she looks at me and she's like, "What's an inner voice?" Like, how cool is that conversation? I'm like, let me tell you what it is, you know? And so I had a conversation with a 5-year-old for about 10 minutes on what your inner voice is and how you can start listening to it now and letting it guide you. And it was just, I don't know, kids are amazing. I just think kids are amazing.
Kids are amazing, and adults that write for kids are pretty amazing. This is your debut picture book. What inspired you to think that you were able to write a debut picture book?
Well, if I'm being honest, nothing really. What happened after that first summer I spent staying at home with the kids, I really sat down like the first day they went to school, and I remember just my hand hitting a yellow legal pad, and I was just writing so fast because I was taking in just all the things they did all summer, that some were princessy, but some were not. And I wrote that original story, and I kept following breadcrumbs is how I'll describe it, because I didn't know how to get this done. So I wrote the first draft, and, you know, I would tell people I was working on a children's book, and then I would meet a friend that had a friend that had done a children's book, and then I would meet with that person. And it's taken me, come on guys, 26 pages. This book took me 5 years. I was staying at home at the same time, but between the illustrations, which are all paintings, and the story's evolution, and, you know, editing, and then finding a publisher, it's been a really long road, but I just kept at it because it was fun. Mm-hmm. It was kind of me chasing curiosity a little bit, and just, well, what if, you know? And I just kept following each little clue, and now I have one in my hand. So it's kind of crazy.
Is it too early to ask? Is there going to be a follow-up? Have you caught the bug right now, and are you working on a new project?
You know, I have been asked this, and the funny thing is, when you are completely inspired by your own children, I have an idea and have written quite a bit for a second Monroe book, but I also, as I was just telling you, I have 2 girls in middle school now. And so my focus is changing a little bit on what's going on in this like teen tween girl stuff. It's totally different. Mm-hmm. So you can definitely plan on seeing more writing from me, and I'm interested too, to see if I stick with the 4 to 9 range, or if I try to tackle some of these stories and situations that happen in middle school that are maybe not as like cheery and wonderful as, a picture book, but need to be discussed.
Well, absolutely. And I'm curious, as the parent of a middle school, of 2 middle schoolers, what kind of value do we know that there's all this value of reading with our young kids. Have you experienced any of the wonderful things that we get from reading with our middle school kids, or co-reading with our middle school kids?
Yes. And in retrospect, I wish I would have co-read more with my oldest daughter. Mm-hmm. She was honestly always just such a strong reader. She would read like really hard books really fast. And so there almost wasn't this space for us to read it. My little one kind of likes to take her time with stories, and she's really into story. And so one of the things we have committed to this year, I have not read Harry Potter yet, which is a full embarrassment. Like, I don't even know what year it went out. And I tend to love sorcery and magic and imagination and all those types of stories. And so my little one hasn't read it yet. So we are committing to read the Harry Potter series in the next couple years. And it is important to read to them, because thematically it gets a lot more complicated. Mm-hmm. And like we were saying, certain kids see one part of the story, and another kid might hear a totally different part of the story. So it's fun to have the conversations. I think it teaches you a lot about your children too, and what they're paying attention to and what their interests are. And I think reading is so important. And the most important thing as a parent to do is read, right? So yes. They see you reading.
Absolutely. And when those conversations that you want to have with your kids about bullying, or about taking responsibility and honesty and making healthy choices, they're still so much easier to start those conversations while you're talking about a book on the same subject than just sitting down to, well, we have to have this big important conversation tonight.
Oh, almost always. I always say that, or, in a car when they're looking out a window and not making eye contact with you. Mm-hmm. For some reason, they'll talk to you then too, but it's always easier to talk in story and about other people's stories, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's been really easy talking to you about Princess Monroe. I know folks are going to want to know where they can go online to to know more about the book and also to know more about you. So where can they connect with you?
The best place to find me right now is at princessmonroe.com. And there's the links to Amazon are on there, the links to my publisher who I love my printer that was a mom and pop shop, and she made this gorgeous 9x12. I wanted the nostalgic books that I had when I was younger. So that's on there, and you can, if you subscribe to the email on there, Courageous Girl, which is the name of my, that's the umbrella of my project. Mm-hmm. We'll figure out through Princess Monroe and Courageous Girl where I'm going to write next or what I'm going to do. But I think I'm going to be tackling some of these social media topics right now, bullying, manipulating. I just really want my girls and all girls, I feel like, just to be raised to be compassionate and courageous and confident, and maybe, I don't know, start to be on each other's team a little bit more, especially in middle school.
Absolutely. So. That is so very important. Watching guys bully each other, it's kind of horrific, but a bang, getting knocked down to the ground and getting hit, it hurts. It's bad. We shouldn't ever do it. But man, the way girls bully each other, with all the psychological stuff, that I think it's more painful, and the pain lasts for an awful long time.
Oh, and we're only hurting ourselves.
Yes.
Imagine how powerful we would be if we collaborated instead of competed all the time.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, we are looking forward to finding out what is next from Jody Smith, and we're going to invite her back to let us know when she knows what's going on. In the meantime, I want to encourage everybody to go out and check out Princess Monroe. We've been speaking to the author Jody Smith. Jody, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really had a great time.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Patricia Newman. She'll be back with us to tell us about Neyma's Reason to Smile. This is a beautiful book, and you do not want to miss this interview. If you are the author of a wonderful children's book, we would love to help you tell the world all about it. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands and thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. All you need to do is go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com, click on the contact button, let us know about your great book. We will let you know the next easy steps. We want to thank the folks who made today's show so very, very wonderful. We want to thank Jody Smith. Be sure to check out Princess Monroe. I want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan, for all that she does to make the show so very wonderful. Don't miss her blog at readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all of the support that she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for being right here by my side for the entire recording. And of course, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast